everyone, and welcome back to our kitchen. So today we're going to make tamales in chile verde.
For the preparation of the sauce, we need to roast 5 Hatch Chiles, 2 Poblano Peppers, about 2 to 3 Jalapenos, and to add extra heat to the tamales, I'm also going to add 5 to 6 Serrano Peppers. The Hatch Chiles already have a little bit of heat, so if you don't want yours too spicy, you can leave these out completely. I'm also going to boil about 10 to 12 tomatillos until they start to turn a pale color. Then we're going to remove them from the burner and we're going to let them sit in the hot water while we prepare the spices. For the spices, we're going to need 8 to 10 peppercorns, 1 teaspoon of coriander seeds, 1 teaspoon of cumin, and 1.5 tablespoons of Mexican oregano. After roasting the peppers and letting them rest, I removed the stems, peeled them, and removed the seeds from the chile poblano and the Hatch Chiles. The jalapeno and the serrano peppers, I peeled them, but I only removed the stems. We're also going to need half a white onion roughly chopped and about 6 to 8 garlic cloves. Before we place everything into the blender, I'm going to grind the peppercorns and the coriander seeds. Drain out the water from the tomatillos and add them to the blender, along with the peppers, the onion, the garlic, and the seasonings. This is going to be a little bit tight, but we're going to make it work. You may have to press down a little bit on the peppers so we can fit the rest of the ingredients. Once we're done adding those ingredients, we're going to move on to the seasonings. I'm also going to add 2 teaspoons of salt and 1 cup of beef broth or water so it doesn't come out too thick. You want the sauce to have a light, thick consistency similar to this. We're going to set the sauce aside so we can move on to the preparation of the meat. For the meat, I'm going to use 6 to 7 pounds of pork shoulder or pork butt. I'm going to cut it into smaller pieces so we can fit it better into the crock pot and so it can cook evenly. Then we're going to generously season each piece with a little bit of salt and pepper. This year we decided to prepare the meat for the red and the green tamales using the crock pot because it makes it so much easier because you can prepare the meat the night before and the next day all you have to do is put the tamales together. Arrange the meat in the crock pot by adding a layer of the sauce, a layer of the meat, and more of the sauce. And repeat the process until you run out of the meat. This is an 8-quart crock pot. The 6 to 7 pounds of meat that we use fit perfectly into the crock pot. Before we seal it up, I'm also going to add 2 bay leaves. Then we're going to set it on high, and before we go to bed, we're going to turn it down to low and let it cook overnight. The remainder of the sauce, I'm going to transfer it to a small container and I'm going to refrigerate it overnight so we can use it for the preparation of the masa the following day. The meat has been cooking for a little bit over 12 hours. I say about 13 to 14 to be exact, but as you can see, the meat is perfectly cooked and it's falling apart almost effortlessly. Once we're done shredding it, we're going to cover it back up while we clean the hojas and prepare the masa. We're going to start by soaking the hojas first. I'm going to use my sink, but you can also use a large stock pot or a large bowl. As I'm separating the hojas, I'm removing any pieces of corn silk or debris from the hojas or the corn husk. Once we have all the hojas separated, I'm going to place the liner over the hojas to ensure that they're completely submerged in the water. You can also use a large stock pot or something with a little bit of weight to weigh down the hojas. We're going to let them soak in the hot water for about 30 minutes while we prepare the masa.
Preparing the meat the night before makes it so much easier because the next day you can just prepare the masa, put them together and cook them and you're done, which makes it a lot easier, especially if you're doing it by yourself. The tamales are chile verde, but since we made it in the crock pot, we're not going to have broth to prepare the masa with. So we're going to use canned broth. The first thing we're going to add to the bowl is manteca. This is the manteca that we rendered from the chicharrones. If you want to see how I prepared the manteca, you can find the link to that video in the description of this video. We're also going to need maseca or masa, whichever brand you prefer. I like to use this one because it's for tamales especially. This one has a more coarse texture than the one you use for tortillas or gorditas, which is why I like to use it for tamales. And we're also going to need salt, baking powder, and the salsa that we use to prepare the meat with. We set aside 1.5 cups of the sauce so we can use it for the masa. I heated up 4 cups of broth. I also added 2 tablespoons of chicken bouillon to the broth so it can add more flavor to the masa as well. This one's hot right now, so by the time we're done preparing the lard, then this is going to be cooled down. You don't want it to be too hot because you don't want it to cook your masa, and you don't want to burn your hands if you're using your hands to mix the masa. So make sure it's not too hot. So we're going to set that aside so it can continue to cool down, and we're going to start by adding the manteca to the bowl. We're going to use about 4 to 5 cups of manteca. That may seem like a lot, but we're using 15 cups of maseca. We're going to use the entire 5-pound bag. So we are going to measure it this time because I'm not sure how much is in the jar, but look at that. That is perfection. You can still see the little bit of the residue from the chicharrones on the bottom, but it's very minimal. And if you add it to the masa, it's only going to make it taste better. So we're going to start out by measuring it. Look at that. That looks store-bought, doesn't it? You can just add it al tanteo. This is about 1 cup. So we're using 4 cups for the 5 pounds of masa. There's 2, 3. All right, the 4 cups right there. Okay, so before we add anything else, we're gonna whip the manteca. You can use your hands, but I like to use a whisk. Whichever way you feel more comfortable doing it. And I'm gonna stick the spatula in the broth because it's hot and it's gonna melt the manteca. That way none of the manteca goes to waste. All right, now we're gonna beat the manteca until it's nice and smooth and it has a creamy texture. And this one you don't have to beat as much because it's homemade. The ones that you purchase in the store, they're fairly hard and they're not as smooth as the ones that you make at home. So if you want to make the manteca yourself, check out that video because it really does add a lot more flavor to the tamales. Have a nice creamy texture like that. And now I'm going to take this off and I'm going to put it into the broth as well so it can remove some of the manteca. Now we're going to add in the maseca, the masa. And this is 15 cups of masa.
For the 15 cups of masa, I also added 1 tablespoon of baking soda, 4 tablespoons of baking powder, and since I added a couple tablespoons of chicken bouillon to the broth, I'm only going to add 1 tablespoon of salt. You don't want to add too much at one time, otherwise you're going to end up with a salty masa. Mix all these ingredients together until your masa has a crumbly texture. Once it looks like this, we're going to make a small crater in the middle.
I'm going to start by adding the 4 cups of broth that we heated up in the microwave. And then we're going to add all the 4 cups. And we're going to mix this slowly so it doesn't splatter. At this point, it would also be a good idea if we add in the sauce that we set aside. So let me grab that and we're gonna add it in. It coagulated. That is okay because it's gonna go in the masa. And we're definitely gonna need more broth. Now the sauce that we made, we used several peppers. It did come out a little bit spicy. So if you don't want your spicy, you can leave out the Serrano peppers because those are the spiciest peppers. So if you don't want it spicy, you can leave those out. 4 more cups. And mix that one in. The color didn't change much once we added the sauce, but the flavor did. So it's gonna be nice and flavorful. And the mixing part should take anywhere from 25 to 30 minutes, so be very patient. And have some help so they can help you mix it, because it can get a little bit tiring if you're doing it by hand. All right, I'm gonna add 2 more cups. Okay, I think with that we should be enough. We added a total of 10 cups of broth. Okay, between me and my husband, we've been mixing for a little bit over 30 minutes. I believe now the masa is ready, but a great indication to let you know that it's ready is that when you mix it, it doesn't stick to the spoon anymore. You see that? And it doesn't stick to the side of the bowl. So that's a great indication to let you know it's ready. Now that everything's ready, we're gonna remove the husks from the sink and put them in a strainer so the excess water can drain out. And now the fun part begins, putting all these delicious tamales together. You want to pick out a hoja. That's a good size. This is a good size right here. And you want to put the masa on the smoother side of the hoja. The rough part of the hoja is on the outer side. So you want to put the masa on the smoother side of the hoja. When adding the masa to the hoja, you can use a spoon, which is how we used to do it with my mom. I just like to use the spatula because it works just as great. You want to take a small amount of the masa, maybe 2 to 3 tablespoons of the masa. Spread it over the bottom part of the hoja. You want to cover maybe just the middle. If you don't want to cover the entire hoja, maybe just the little, the middle portion of this. However you feel comfortable doing it. This is how I was brought up doing them, so this is how I put them together. And now we're going to add a little bit of the meat. That turned out amazing, by the way. So we're just going to take a small amount of the meat and just put it right in the middle. You don't want to add too much because then it's hard to close. So we're going to close it up and then fold the bottom. We're going to place it on a cookie sheet. And we're going to continue with the rest until we run out of masa, meat, or whichever one comes first. Let me show you something really quick. When you have a big hoja like this, to me it seems like a waste of hoja just to make one tamal. So I like to make twins. Let me show you how I do that. So I spread out the masa to one side, and then I do it on the second side because it's really hard to open the hoja and just do it with one hand, especially if you have small hands like me. So I do it in sections. Okay, so now we're gonna add the meat to one side of the hoja. There. And we're gonna close it up. And then we're gonna do the same thing to the other side. And we're gonna close it up and we're gonna meet right in the middle. Fold it over, and now you have twinsy tamales. And we're gonna set that one over there too as well. And we're just gonna continue with the rest, and my husband's gonna jump in and help me with these tamales so we can finish faster.
To steam the tamales, and depending on how many people you're going to serve, you can steam them one of 2 ways. You can use a large steamer like this one. To arrange them in the steamer, I layered the bottom of the steamer with hojas that I couldn't use or that were too small to use. Then I arranged the tamales in a stand-up position, starting from the outer edge and then working my way in towards the middle. Once the steamer is filled with the tamales, I add another layer of hojas over the tamales. This is going to help to seal in the steam, and it's going to help your tamales to cook a lot faster. Steam them indoors or outdoors over low heat for about 1.5 to 2 hours. To steam them in the Instant Pot, add 1 cup of water to the Instant Pot. Arrange the tamales in the basket insert, which usually fits about 12 to 16 tamales depending on the size. This is a quicker way to steam the tamales, but only if you're making for a small crowd. Insert the basket into the Instant Pot and set it to steam for 40 minutes. If you have leftover tamales and want to store them for later use, the best way to freeze the tamales is by freezing them before they're cooked. Tightly seal them in aluminum foil or in a freezer-safe bag, and they can last up to 6 months. And when you're ready to enjoy a few, remove them from the freezer and place them directly into the Instant Pot. No need to unthaw them, and they come out tasting just like if you prepared them that same day.
And now for my favorite part, the taste test. Whenever we make tamales, we always make the red ones because my kids love the red ones. So we decided to give it another try and make them a little bit different this time. We gave it that salty touch. Hopefully it's a recipe that they will like because we added a lot of extra peppers to this to make it extra rich. So now we're gonna do the taste test. They look really good, but the taste is what's gonna determine if it's a keeper or do we have to start from scratch with a different recipe. These actually came out really good. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness, these are very good. And I'm not just saying it because I made them or because I want you to try it, but they came out delicious.